3, 2, 1. Panel, ladies and gentlemen, government science a bit strange because they try to have their cake and eat it too. They tell you that status quo and society we have right now is kind of shit, so we need everyone to kumbaya and combine together, and then somehow we're going to have less shit. Because what? We have a central bank, we have a singular government. Those are exactly the point where these singular institutions become your single point of failure. Last time I checked, the reason why we can actually call out dictators and bad things happening because those borders are directly being affected by those people and they have separate executive and judicial entities to be able to solve those particular things. On-site government, those literally become your government, become your judicial system. It's much more difficult to be able to deal with it. What is the main issue in this debate? Why will the formation of the EAF open up the region to more risk, and why are the perceived benefits speculative at best? Responses will be integrated. Opening opposition told us things we already know with symmetrical impacts. The socio-cultural differences they characterized are made more evident when they're actually forced into a shared border with a shared currency, with a shared economy, in the guise of, effectiveness. Jaron filled this in with the missing middle analysis with an economic vertical extension and an industrial horizontal extension that actually engages more directly with opening government as opposed to our opening. Firstly, opening government told us about there's a capital influx that actually happens. But we think that this is more likely to lead to a skewed concentration of wealth and opportunity that is actually the precedent to opening up's infighting argument. The elites and businesses and status quo from richer countries like Sudan and Kenya are still going to be there. They're still going to be seen as more lucrative as opposed to the Burundi or Tanzanian businesses. So you force these businesses to have to adapt or be neglected, and that's essentially an unfair choice to make, which leads to the impacts that you get from opening about the loss of things like nationalism and all of that and their identities. Opening government's entire case is contingent on the economic reality being compatible and complementary to each other. They assume that we have all of the political, economic, and industrial infrastructures in place to make this federation a habitable and effective country. The point in which they form is where all of these inequalities are more likely to be exacerbated. Why? Because having a single central bank assumes that that one person that they're going to democratically elect is going to make the best monetary policy for the entire country, which everyone in the debate already talked about as more complicated than they actually are. I'll take you in a bit. Via chat, please. So it assumes that they're going to make the best monetary policy, whether these be interest rates, reserve requirements, or open market operations. When was the last time, guys, that all of these different economists and politicians were under one roof and made the right decision? Sounds like a utopia to me, right? It's more likely to lead to things like analysis paralysis at best, or a rushed, shitty decision at worst in the hopes of hoping that you make a right one. When they make a mistake, it actually becomes harder to undo because now you affect a wider scope and scale of individuals. Case in point, right? Like right now in status quo, every central bank around the world is at the mercy of what the US Fed is going to do with Jerome Powell, who can't decide yet if we're going to do shit like hike interest rates, cut interest rates, or do nothing, right? This isn't a prefers motion, right? Like this house prefers that the African East area would have been a collective, but this is a policy. So, all the harms that exist in status quo, it's fair to assume, are going to be carried over, which government side characterized was still going to be there. So it's completely valid for us to clash and question the feasibility of these particular things in the guise of unity. Their entire case assumes that realities are going to magically be fixed together when they're actually combined. But sure, I'll take the POI of the guy who said POI earlier. The push to get better in status quo is when you're able to compare, right? Meaning, yes, a lot of these countries are largely experiencing hyperinflation, are largely experiencing some degree of corruption. But the point in which you're able to say that, oh, my situation here is marginally less than another place, or that other place is significantly worse than what I'm experiencing, is exactly the call to help that you're able to get from the international community, from the IMF, from the World Bank, when you're able to hold those particular people accountable. The fact that you have multiple layers of bureaucracy that exist within a state, that exist within an economy, is precisely what serves as a check and balance or a fetter for all these people to just like do the shitty things they want to do, whether it be to steal particular things or use the levers of nepotism and corruption they have to be able to skew people within their particular favor. That's why it's important what Jaron told you about. In order to allow opposition parties to coalesce together, they need to have these separate structures, because when you have these separate structures, it's just more difficult for gymnastics of these malevolent actors to come in and try to do it. But when you all gather under one singular federation, yes, there might be more discourse at best, people can more vote, there are more eyes to be able to watch it, but there's just more risk when something bad happens. There's more risk when you have a particular individual who's able to gain control of that. Like in the POI I mentioned earlier, right? Like, who's gonna be able to be the whistleblower? Of course, you're gonna have people who are gonna be like, fuck that guy. But the point in which that guy is the one who's controlling the state, or that guy is the one controlling the judiciary, is a point in which life becomes more difficult. Why are we better than our opening, right? Because we gave you the missing economic middle analysis and responses that better deals with OG frame, as opposed to like jumping to the values of like culture and identity, which come after the fact or come as a consequence of these economic things not being met. So in order to really be able to get the benefits that our opening talked about, you need to have the status quo, which we argue might be shit but isn't as shit, as opposed to the risk wherein you put all these people under one roof. What do we exclusively get from our side? You get the idea that just because you put a central bank up or put these economic fetters up in the guise of there being just one singular one, is exactly the point in which that you open it up to more risk, either from malevolent actors within or people from the outside like China, who are going to now have a singular target to be able to attack. And for all of these reasons, we think the motion has to fall. Thank you.